All right, welcome back to crossover edition of Locked On Sunbelt and Locked On ACC. Dave Schultz along with Candace Cooper. So thrilled to have Candace on, always mocking her having to cover Duke football before my guy from the Fairhope Pirates, Riley Leonard, got there to, show some what winning football looks like. But now we're talking basketball. We got round of 32, if you will. The JMU Dukes upsetting Wisconsin. Duke moves on to play Vermont. Candace, thanks for doing this. And tell us about this Duke basketball team. It doesn't feel like it's the normal Duke basketball team, right? They're a 4 seed. Usually they're fighting for a number 1 or number 2 seed. Tell us about this Duke basketball team.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. This Duke team is one that is very much fickle. Sometimes they are the highs of highs, and then they can also be the lows of lows. I think this team is definitely run through Kyle Filipowski. When Tyrese Proctor, their guard, returned, we figured it was going to be a good 1-2 punch, but they haven't necessarily gelled as a team well. You've seen freshman newcomer Jared McCain sort of take off in clutch moments during some very high octane games and had some really great performances, but overall, it's definitely felt like a less inspired Duke team. They haven't really bought into the villain role. And, I guess maybe they did buy into the villain role, but didn't realize that you have to play like very inspired and like good basketball as well. So they're having a sort of disconnect. I think Kyle has been in the news sometimes for all the wrong reasons. CC, right. Court storming, Wake Forest, all of that good stuff. But thankfully has made a recovery and has been able to, finish the season off well. Didn't have a great performance in their first opening against Vermont, but I think overall this team is certainly one where you can never count them out. They have the weapons. Obviously, they have the recruits. I think there's been questions around Jon Scheyer, head coach, in his third year, kind of figuring out how he's going to make this team better. It's been a little bit inconsistent. I don't think they play as intense as maybe they would with a Coach K, but he's just finding his way. He's finding a team. Like, they were recent ACC champions, so you can't take that away from them in terms of tournament wise. But survive and advance is the name of the game, and they're doing just that.
All right, so it doesn't seem like it's a typical Duke team because it's usually, you're talking about a 1-2 punch. Usually there's like 3 or 4 guys, right? Yeah. And then whoever comes off the bench, a number 6 man, who, right. Kubek, going back in the day, gets 10 points in like 15 right. minutes. But it really is Kyle Filipowski's team. He's like 12 assists behind from leading the team in points, rebounds, assists, blocks, and steals. So he averages 2.8 assists a game, and Proctor 3.6 assists a game. How does a team try and shut Filipowski down? Because he is the prototypical modern big man, right? He is 7 foot, about 250 pounds. He can play inside and shoot it outside.
Yeah, I think, Vermont showed a good amount to that and held him to only 3 points when they played, but it was just keeping the ball out of his hands. While he is great at rebounding, had 12 rebounds against this Vermont matchup, he certainly wasn't, his power force in terms of shooting it inside or outside. So I think, you get him in foul trouble. I think that's something that he can get a little bit emotional at times. And so you can probably get him with 2 or 3 in the first half and put him on the bench, and where, I think Bickerstaff, and I also think that, what is his name? The other one,
Jerry.
Edwards.
Yep.
Yes.
Edwards and then
yes.
Jalen Jerry.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I think that those guys are going to have a great time, just getting riled up and emotional. Watching them last night and just seeing how intense they played. I don't see that from Duke necessarily. So if you can just get Kyle sort of flustered and in his own head, I think that's kind of the way you sort of beat him.
We're talking with Candace Cooper from Locked On ACC. I'm Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt. We're previewing the Dukes versus Duke, which is funny, I guess, a little bit. All right, talk about Jon Scheyer because, like my guy, Adrian Autry at Syracuse, these guys are, replacing legends. And they're doing it, trying to, do their own thing. And at the same time, probably in the back of his head is like, what would Mike do? Right? Because that's easier to spell than what would Krzyzewski do.
1,000%.
So there's no, and you get a Mark Byington who has worked his way up from Georgia Southern to JMU. Rumors have him he's going to West Virginia. So what's going on with Mark Scheyer? Because there's no learning curve. When you're the head coach of Duke, because if you go, like you said, 3 years, you start going 4 or 5 and without being in the Final Four and winning a national championship, the seat gets a little bit hot.
Yeah, I definitely think he would have fared better to maybe not start with Duke as your first head coaching position. I think that
Right.
he's very basketball IQ is out of the charts. Having that brotherhood and understanding what it means to play for the brotherhood, that's all well and good. But at the end of the day, being a head coach is certainly a different beast, right? You have to, kiss the babies and do a lot of the paperwork and a lot more things on the recruiting trail than maybe you did as an assistant or even at a lower tiered school. You sort of get that privilege of, earning it and then getting to a place like Duke and really understanding. I think that he ultimately is just trying to figure out how to inspire guys that in the Duke system, we've come to know that they're more than likely one and dones, or, they try to be one and dones depending on how their season kind of boils out. But he hasn't necessarily, they haven't really had that cachet, as we're used to seeing. So I think he's just struggled with the identity of Duke since the Coach K leave. I think Coach K's ending wasn't exactly, rose-colored glasses and, as much fun as people may have wanted, with the whole North Carolina, picking up wins, Final Four and all of that. The exit wasn't great. And so trying to start from there and really remind folks of who Duke is. Again, winning ACC championship in the tournament is great, but how do you capitalize on those sort of moments hasn't necessarily been seen in March for Coach Shire, but I ultimately feel like he'll find it. It's just that learning curve and that patience level at Duke basketball is certainly slimmer than most.
Well, it could be coming next year, right? I think they have like 3 of the top 10 players coming in. And so next year will be the real test for John Shire because of that recruiting class. All right. So one of the big differences between what, JMU is going to see between Wisconsin and Duke is that Duke is going to play much better defense than Wisconsin. And we'll get to the JMU didn't play all that well offensively against Wisconsin, but it'll be interesting to see. It felt like JMU's defense tried to make Wisconsin aware that they were there. Kind of, I compared it to what the Patriots used to do to the Colts and make sure, you go over the middle, we're going to get a hand on you. We're going to put a body on you. And that's what JMU did. And I kind of feel like that's what Duke has always done. It'll be interesting to see, because JMU does have more than one guy. They have 2, 3, 4, 5 guys who can score. How Duke, makes their presence felt defensively.
Yeah, I think they've definitely had some defensive kind of head scratchers. You've seen some very critical turnovers, crucial turnovers towards ends of games for Duke. And, either they take over and they're dominant or they, fight tooth and claw and maybe are able to pull them out, but they haven't been, again, I think in one where at this stage in the game, everyone's good, right? You have to play the game. Nobody is sitting here looking necessarily at if you're a 6 seed, 11 seed, a 12 seed, you're playing with heart. And I think JMU right now is playing very inspired basketball, and there's nothing better, of course, than beating someone of the caliber of Duke. So I think Duke sometimes needs to just remember that the front of the jersey, but they don't necessarily always play up or to their level of expectation. And I can definitely see them playing side by side to JMU. So they're going to have to figure that out quickly if they don't want to get into a sort of hole that they can't necessarily dig themselves out of offensively.
Talking to Candace Cooper, Locked On ACC. I'm Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt. We're previewing Duke versus JMU in this round of 32 for a chance to go to the Sweet 16. All right, so let's talk JMU because defensively they were outstanding against Wisconsin. They got out to an 18-5 lead, not because they shot it particularly well, but because they kept on turning Wisconsin over. Wisconsin had 5 points in the first 10 minutes of the first half, and then they scored 4 points in the last 7 minutes of the half, and those were all free throws. So, if JMU puts that kind of results against Duke, they'll be in the game, right? The question is, they did not shoot the ball very well. They very easily could have beaten Wisconsin by 20 or 30 points. Terrence Edwards Jr. had 14 points, but was 5 of 13. Noah Friedel did hit 2 big threes, one really preventing Wisconsin from coming back. But if JMU can find some rhythm offensively, it'll be interesting to see how it'll be interesting to see who Duke tries to take away. Do you go after the head of the snake with it being Xavier Brown or Michael Green, the 2-point guards? Or, you try to prevent Noah Friedel? Who is their shutdown? That's a good question. Who is Duke's shutdown defensive guy? And who do we put him on? Because I had JMU people after the game could Noah Friedel get into it? And I'm like, well, you got to give Wisconsin credit. They probably tried to take him out of the game, and he was all of 2 of 6. Maybe his shot was off. I don't know.
Yeah.
But who would Duke have to try and, defend some of the JMU players, because that was why I kind of like JMU over Wisconsin kind of stereotypical. Wisconsin's not going to have the kind of athletes that Duke, Kentucky, or Kansas have. And so who do we think is going to try, because it won't be Filipowski, he's going to be inside. Who do we think Duke has to try and shut down JMU's offensive threats? And there are at least, there's 3 of them, 2 guards and the big guy Bickerstaff and/or Wooden and Carey inside.
Yeah, so I think Jeremy Roach definitely with his senior leadership and sort of his defense will be a key factor for Duke, just because he's been in these positions and he can help set up the guys like a Kyle Filipowski if he, however he performs. I think Tyrese Proctor is also going to need to be an incredible defender. Jared McCain has moments and flashes. Mark Mitchell is also great at defense. But to me, Jeremy Roach is the one who stands out the most, just because of kind of where he's been in these scenarios and understanding, like, if you can aggravate and if you can frustrate the guard play, if you can force them to turn over, I think you're putting yourself in a good position as a Duke team that doesn't necessarily always have the cachet when it comes to offense this season, but has certainly been one to where they're gonna make you pay for the turnovers.
So is this one of those games? And I'm not even sure if Wisconsin ever felt it the other night, because they were behind the whole game. So I don't think the pressure mounted because like maybe against an Auburn earlier in the tournament or a Kentucky, because they were never in the game outside of like a few minute stretch in the second half where they missed a layup to make it 4, and then Friedel hits the 3. How does Duke react? Because it's a typical Duke team, right? They don't get, if they do lose, when they do lose, and they have lost 8 times, that is atypical of Duke. That does not happen very often, right? Anything more than like 3 losses is a lot for a Duke team, but they don't get blown out, right? They lose close ball games because it's Duke. How do they act when it does get close late?
I definitely think, like I said, being critical of John Shire definitely depends on, the second half adjustments. That'll be essential for them, as well as just, the guys making head scratching, sometimes freshman, young guy mistakes, right? Even freshman and sophomore mistakes. And so, who do you give the ball to? I would trust Jeremy Roach in these sorts of situations, just because he's a senior leader and he has definitely kept Duke in games and kept them winning and post season runs. So, I would trust in him, but overall, I think it's just going to be those mental mistakes. Can they look past them? Can they allow for themselves not to get too emotionally caught up and, have unnecessary fouls? Can they keep Kyle out of foul trouble? That'll be essential. So that would be my keys for sure.
What about, I did not see a switch, and I know Duke later on, mostly probably because of, Boeheim's effect on Krzyzewski with the Team USA, that, once in a while they would actually play zone. Does Duke play a zone at all? Because I don't remember seeing too much zone at all with JMU and Wisconsin. I know JMU will switch up defenses, but I don't think they did it last night, because whatever they were doing was working for the most part.
Right. Yeah, I think for Shire's zone sometimes is like that rare treat that we see from Duke, but not necessarily one. I think man is probably going to be better for them, and just like the confidence that I feel like they have in Proctor and Jared McCain is going to be one of those essential pieces for them to be lockdown defenders. They're going to have to play big. I think with Kyle, you're not going to you can't let anyone come inside, and you really can't anybody steal your lunch. And he's didn't put up the points that we're used to seeing, but we're going to need to see some jumpers. I don't think we see too many outside shots, but he's certainly going to earn every bucket this go round.
It's Candace Cooper, Locked On ACC, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sun Belt. I would say, in most cases, right, outside of Duke fans, everyone's going to be rooting for JMU. But they are playing in Brooklyn, which is basically Duke's home away from home from Durham, North Carolina. It's not the Garden, but they are playing. That's close enough. New York City, all those Dukies who, from the Upper East and West Side that go to, Duke to get out of the weather, I guess, will be there. What kind of do you think it will be a Duke home court advantage? How, compared to what it would have been if this was maybe in Chicago or Kansas City?
Yeah. So when I saw, JMU last night, I feel like their fans traveled really well. So I think it will be a good mix. I think in terms of just wanting to be, how many people can say they've seen Duke basketball up close and personal, especially in a place like Brooklyn? So I think it'll be evenly distributed, but I do know that Duke has a strong brotherhood up there in the New York area, and there are going to be plenty of fans. But ultimately they are, like I said, we talked about them being that villain team, and people love nothing more than to see the villain get taken down. So will that mean inspiration for them? Who knows? But if there was ever a time to kind of find it, this certainly is it. You got a lot of guys in the NBA from Duke who think that they can make, run run. I know Paolo Banchero has been one who's really high on the Blue Devils, feeling like they've been sort of underrated and kept under the radar this season. But, to be in an environment where, it's playing inspired basketball, Duke's going to need all of that mojo, that extra magic to kick in, which, sometimes they struggle with. Sometimes they struggle with the emotional side of the game and getting really excited or playing up. So they're going to have to play to their potential and more if they're going to be a really good JMU team.
At the same time, do you think JMU can get psyched out? Do teams get psyched out playing Duke anymore? Is that a thing? Because I know it certainly used to be.
Yeah, I don't think that it's a thing anymore. I think, like you said, 8 losses, certainly they feel very beatable. The teams that they have lost to, like the Georgia Techs of the world, right? It's just been like, all right, well, they got some guys who just come in and say, hey, I have to play and run. And I think in this culture that we have now, more AAU, where you're probably playing some of your best friends who are on a circuit, they just happen to go to, a higher seeded team or things like that. It's just a matter of, putting on the jersey, lacing them up and giving them a good run. So I don't see them being a threat at all. And I think that's probably what's going to make JMU pretty hungry.
All right, before we wrap it up here with Candace Cooper to tell you how much I'm following ACC basketball, how long has Damon Stoudemire been at Georgia Tech? When did that become a thing? I'm like, wasn't he just in the NBA?
Yes, this is his first season, and he's played a very inspired Georgia Tech team after Coach Passner was let go. And I think that they're probably, if you talk about ACC schools, one to watch out for. They're a very young team, but they had some scrappy ones. They beat Duke and North Carolina. So I think that Duke is definitely a team that they've been beat by those underdogs, and so they understand that at the end of the day, people want to beat them. Can they prove themselves worthy? That'll be interesting.
All right, so wrapping things up with Candace Cooper, Locked On SEC. I'm Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt. Candace, give me 2 keys to the game for Duke to come out victorious.
Yeah, Kyle Filipowski is going to have a better game than he did against Vermont from an offensive standpoint. I think rebounding is great, but putting in maybe some offensive rebounds that puts it back up. I think capitalizing on turnovers for him, or even just putting his team in position to where, they can put the game away early, that's certainly going to be helpful. I feel like if you're getting in a dogfight with JMU, it's not going to necessarily go in the favor of Duke, but I will say that for someone like Kyle, who said their sights are set on things bigger, this is kind of how you prove yourself. You're getting into that Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final 4 conversation, and being that Duke of old, or at least carrying to where you feel like this team should be, is going to be essential for him to sort of prove that. Another key I would say will be Jeremy Roach, right? That senior factor, that senior leadership, especially in this tournament against an inspired and very good scrappy JMU team. He's going to have to keep the emotions kind of settled and make sure that the guys don't get too overwhelmed by the moment, but are still able to play their games offensively and really be locked down in defense.
All right, so a couple of points for JMU. They're going to have to come out and play that kind of defense again, which was amazing. And it'll be interesting to see if it gets a little chippy because they were allowing a lot of contact early on in that ball game. And as we saw, JMU could get emotional, and, you get emotional in the wrong guy's face, and we'll see if there is, a lot of emotion on the court. But they're going to have to come up with something pretty good. I kind of felt like JMU made Wisconsin aware that they were there, and they'll probably try to do the same thing with Duke. The difference is I think Duke is going to make sure that JMU is aware that the Dukies are there. Yeah. And at the same time, I said JMU needed to hit 10 3-pointers against Wisconsin. They hit 5. If JMU hits 5 3-pointers against Duke, they ain't winning the game. They have to hit somewhere between 8 and 10. I'll give myself a range this time. They need to hit between 8 and 10 3-pointers to have a shot in this ball game. And if they hit 8 to 10 3-pointers, they will be in the ball game. Whether they win or not, that means they probably hit 12 or 14. But that's what I think. If they can get to double digits in 3-pointers, I think they'll give Duke a run for their money. The line came out, I guess at one point in time, it was 6.5. I saw it 7. It's Duke 7.5. I guess it was going to be 7 or 8. I think that's probably where it belongs. You give me 7 points in JMU, I'm taking the Dukes.
Oh, every single time. I think that, a Duke team, this is going to come down to the wire. I think it's going to come down to two or less possessions. And the team that comes out on top, I think the one that can keep either Kyle Filipowski in foul trouble, or the one that allows Kyle Filipowski to get going.
She is Candace Cooper, Locked On ACC. Who's the Duke starting quarterback this year?
Who is the Duke's quarterback? I need to talk to Manny Diaz. I haven't been dialed into that one. I'll have to circle back because I am not quite sure, to be honest with you.
I'm not sure Manny Diaz sure is right now. I think that's the issue. She's Candace Cooper, Locked On ACC. I'm Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt. Should be a heck of a ball game. I think it's a 4:15 Eastern time zone game. Didn't get the prime time. Some other ones did that, but it should be a whale of a game. Candace, thanks for doing the Locked On crossover episode. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the basketball.
Thank you. Same to you, Dave.
Well, that's outstanding. I can edit that and go to this Cajuns game and start drinking.
Well, please enjoy that one for all of us.
I hope Kenton's doing okay.
Yes, he's doing. I think it's a mental thing more than anything else. But yeah, he's doing all right.
Can I tell you, I was in a major accident. Not that major, but it was my fault.
Yeah.
And I do double takes when I make a left now.
Yeah, for sure. I think that he's, life out of control, right? You never know what's going to be your day. And
you never know. Yes. And, I'm struggling with work right now myself. So, and, because everybody shares everything on social media, a lot of people have a lot worse than I do. Hashtag always a bright side. He's walking, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this could have been a devastating injury.
Absolutely.
And if he's stiff, at the same time, he can get a few pain pills and enjoy some good night's sleep.
Absolutely, that for sure. I'll definitely let him know that you reach out. A lot of people have. Zach has, a lot of Jarvis, all the groups. So thank you. I appreciate that. You have a great rest of your day. Enjoy it.
Will do. Thank you.